Welcome back to the Conservative Commandos. I'm glad you've stuck around because we are now to the part of the show where we have our guests. And as I like to remind you, we have the very best guests on TV and radio. It doesn't matter where you go, you're not going to find better guests. You may find more expensive multi-million-dollar studios, but you won't find better guests. And here to prove that is Sarah Jane Allen. She's the founder of New Mexico Alive, also Mothers for Liberty in New Mexico, and she's a board member, or a board chair actually, of the Viante Foundation. And what's interesting in talking with her, I've learned she's confident that New Mexico can be won by those who care about freedom and liberty. And she is assembling and has assembled an expert team to help make that the case. And I think that's really good news. But with that, Sarah Jane, welcome to the Conservative Commandos. We're very glad to have you, and I want to extend a personal thanks to you for proving that we have the best guests on TV and radio.
Thank you, George. I appreciate being with you.
Well, I wanted to ask you, what are some of the things on your radar screen? I know you're working on a lot of things, so you probably have more than one radar screen, but we'll get through as many radar screens as we can in our segments here.
Well, I have a lot, as you said, but being the first Moms for Liberty chapter here in New Mexico, I feel as though that we are really trying to show everyone within our state that parents' voices need to be heard. This last legislative session, there were school choice bills presented before, and it was really shot down by the left very fiercely, but it was really needed for our children within New Mexico because they need a choice. Education is an economy, and our kids are not the same as they were 20 years ago. It seems as though we're trying to take a square peg and pound it into a square hole, and our kids just aren't fitting in it, and they need options. They need really good options.
Absolutely. I live in Virginia, and we had a recent governor, well, not now, it's a couple of years into it, but almost 2 years now, but a gubernatorial election where we had a former governor who was running for office. He was, by all measures, a popular former governor running for another term in Virginia against a new guy who'd never really been heard of. He'd never run for office before and everything else. And he made the mistake of telling voters, I don't think parents should have any say in their children's education. No, they don't have any role to play. And I'm thinking to myself, I remember hearing him say that and thinking, he's going to have to step back from that one. That's insane. Good grief. Of course, he never stepped back from it, and he lost the election to a newbie.
Yes.
And this is a state, Virginia, that used to be maybe lean a little bit red and had a little bit of blue in it, and has become over the time pretty blue. And yet a newbie who had never run for office before defeated a well-known and relatively popular former governor on the issue you're talking about.
Yes, it's interesting you say that because just recently, the Albuquerque Teachers Federation has given me a hard time because I have stood up for parents' voices and that parents need to.
How dare you?
I really supported our school board in that they wanted the parents' rights and responsibilities, which is actually a three-way agreement between the teachers, the parents, and the students. They all work together, they all collaborate, and then we'll have a more successful student. I love our teachers. We have great teachers, and they've supported. I actually have 6 children, and my daughters, they really help my daughters learn and love to read. We need to have more parents' rights and responsibilities within our education, and help everyone work together to have more success.
Absolutely. I used to serve on a public school board, and my politics became pretty clear, so I don't think I was always that popular with the administration. But having said all that, what's interesting to me, also, I had 7 kids I have 7 kids, but they're now old enough they're not in public school anymore. The youngest has gone off to college recently. But anyhow, bottom line is the interesting thing about education is we have all these debates about what the curriculum should be, what this should be, and I think that's appropriate. But to the extent we can't agree, that seems where school choice comes into me, because I believe that I have the right to determine what my children's education should be. I suspect other parents may feel that way too. And if we don't agree, then maybe we should just pick different schools.
Exactly. Parents pick their children's education through trust and what values they have, and parents need a selection. As I said before, education needs to be an economy. When you have school choice, you'll have reform. I love public schools. My children attended public schools,
Mine
but
too.
but they need to have a refiner's fire, I guess you could say, in attracting their students. Albuquerque Public Schools, within the last 5 years, has lost 10,000 of their students. Where have they gone? We have a large district, but where have those students gone? Obviously, they have found another choice or have done something different.
Yeah. Well, when people say things like that would ruin the public schools, the answer is, well, I don't think it'll ruin the public schools. First of all, the existence of the public schools isn't so we have public schools. It's so we can educate children.
Exactly.
And so as long as we're educating children, I don't know that we have much care about whether they're being educated at a private school or at a home school or at some maybe even religiously affiliated school or a public school. And if you're going to define it by, well, if the enrollment falls at public schools, you've ruined them. It's like, well, no, not actually. You know, public or private schools have been relatively small sliver of things for a long time. It didn't ruin them. And I just feel like we have to look at kind of first principles is what are we trying to do? Are we trying to fund a system? Or are we trying to educate children?
I love
I come down on that. I come down on the side of let's educate the children.
Yes, yes. I was speaking in Farmington just this last week, and I let the people know that our teachers are fabulous. Our students are amazing. It's the system that needs changing, because obviously 10,000 kids have left. Why have they done that? That's a question to ask and a question to resolve.
Yeah, very good. And I think you're right about that. I think if you look at education, like when I was a kid growing up, of course, I jokingly say that one of my classmates was Thomas Jefferson. Not quite true, but you know. Anyhow, I did go to Thomas Jefferson's College for my, I went out west for undergraduate, but for my law degree, I went to the University of Virginia, Thomas Jefferson's. So there's at least a granule of truth to what I said. But bottom line is, all the stories I read in the papers today about what's going on in public schools sounds impossible to me because I don't really remember what the politics of my teachers were because they weren't really political in nature. They may have voted for, you know, Richard Nixon or Hubert Humphrey in the 1968 election. I don't recall.
Right.
I recall that I participated in one of the classroom debates that we, you know, on the Weekly Reader presidential thing. Sure. I was the stand-in for Richard Nixon because he couldn't make it to Waynewood Elementary School back in 1968, the week before the election. And of course, someone else. And I don't recall getting any blowback. I don't think the teacher cared. And then now we're to a time where things are very different, it seems to me. And I don't know that that's necessarily teachers' fault or the system's fault or what. But I think we have to get back to a time and a place where it's not the job of the teacher to essentially make the classroom political. And some of the stories I read, I'm like, wow, I can't believe that's happening. And even when my youngest kids were in school, I was on the school board then. And so I was later told by the principal that my kids were going to, that the superintendent called and said, make sure that he gets the very best teachers in the school.
Sure.
Because if he comes to the school board meeting armed with horror stories, we're going to hear about it, and I don't want to hear about that. So that I didn't get paid. I got paid like $1 an hour to do it, but that made it totally worth it. I was getting the very best teachers.
Yes.
So I guess my question is, do you have a sense of what's happened where we've gotten to a time? I don't, you know, I think you're younger than I am, so maybe schools were not quite in the same. But when I was a kid growing up, I didn't feel that the school I was going to was competing with my family's values or my religious values or my patriotic views. They were just trying to teach me how to read and write, learn math, science, and history, and learn to love learning and, you know, those kinds of things. But they weren't necessarily trying to make me a liberal or a conservative activist. They just wanted me to be a good citizen.
Sure. No, I go back to the system, and I've learned a lot since starting Moms for Liberty, and it's a lot embedded within the curriculum that our kids are being taught. I'm not sure if you've heard of social emotional learning, and that can be a good thing, but it can also be a bad thing because it can, it's almost like the Trojan horse because it brings into the education, embeds in the education, the critical race theory, the diversity, equity, inclusion. Everything is put through an equity lens. And I always go back to the example because I like teaching by examples. My husband's a fraternal twin. How can you expect him and his twin, born at the same time, have the same opportunities and everything, but how can you expect them to turn out equal? You can't. Yeah. You can't. And we need the AP classes. We need to have ACT tests and SATs. We all have to be challenged to the highest level, and I think that is where we are falling short, is because everything is going through the equity lens.
You make a very good point, because I think when I was a kid growing up, equity wasn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's kind of become to mean something different now. Equity used to mean that the system was fair, like equitable and things like that. And in law school, equity and court's attempt to make sure that someone was treated fairly before the law was important.
Sure.
But now it's become this kind of politically correct notion where it's more about enforcing equal outcomes.
Yes.
And the reality is, while I think in our society, we don't want anyone starving, we don't want anybody, needing medical care but not able to obtain it. We don't want people freezing to death in the cold. I think we can all agree on that. But it's not necessarily a bad thing that some guy can afford a more expensive car than me.
Exactly.
I don't care that much. It's just not that big a deal. Or he can afford a boat, whereas if I go on vacation, my only hope is I can maybe rent one for a few hours here or there. That's okay too. Mm-hmm. Life is not wrapped around me being exactly the same as everyone else. And yet somehow we've got this in our head that this is now an important function of government, is to do this. And the funny thing is, it's never done it by lifting people. It always does it by suppressing people.
Yes.
And I prefer the idea of we should, try to lift people around us, not suppress those around us so that nobody's any better off than anyone else. I don't know if you see it that way, but that's kind of my one man's take.
I agree. One of the equity elements is equity grading. And that is, every student that walks in the door starts out with a 50%. They don't have to do anything, but they start out with 50%, and homework's not graded. So our children are smart. They're going to realize, hey, I don't have to do my homework to get a good grade. So that goes in with the equity lens, and viewing all of us as equals. And as you said, we need to have people are talented in different ways. Some will be lawyers, some will be plumbers, some will be electricians, but we all need everyone to make our society better. Yeah,
that's a very good point. And trying to make everyone the same doesn't actually get us anywhere. But exactly. Yeah, it's a good point. It's like even on a football team, you could have the 15 greatest quarterbacks of all time on the same team.
Right.
And if that's all they have on their roster, they probably won't win even one game.
No.
Because we need different strengths and different abilities. In that sense, diversity is important.
Yes.
But for anymore, it seems like the left defines diversity as, do you look different than me?
Yes.
And I'm kind of like, I was always told appearance is only skin deep, but you're acting like it really matters. And I would argue diversity is things like what our interests are, our talents are, our abilities are, the way we think, all those things.
Yes.
How we look, doesn't matter.
Right.
But anyhow, now's probably a good time for us to take a quick break, but we will be right back. We've got to take care of a little business, but don't go away, folks, because the break will be short, and B, Sarah Jane Allen will be right back with me for another segment, and there's lots more to discuss. I can promise you that. We'll see you on the flip side.
You're still looking good.
I'm still feeling good. I've got all your MyPillow products. Mattress topper, bed sheets, MyPillows, towels, slippers, blankets, sleepwear, dog beds.
Whoa, Charles. Everyone now can get MyPillow products at huge discounts at MyPillow.com. That's right. Now's the time to go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to take advantage of our 3-in-1 sale. We're bringing you exciting new products, overstock specials, and closeout deals you won't find anywhere else. For example, when you buy one of our brand new MyPillow 2.0s, you get another one absolutely free. And with our overstock sale, you save 50% on our luxurious Giza Dream bed sheets. That's as low as $29.99 for the best sheets ever. And with our biggest closeout special, you get our all-season slippers for only $35, or our sandals and slides for just $25. Quantities are limited, and once they're gone, they're gone.
To order, please call 800-797-7893 and use the promotion code AUNTV, that's 800-797-7893, and AUNTV, again. That's 800-797-7893 and AUNTV.
Welcome back to the Conservative Commandos. I'm glad you stuck around because we've been having a great conversation with Sarah Jane Allen. She, of course, is the founder of New Mexico Alive and Mothers for Liberty in New Mexico, and she's the board chair of the Viante Foundation. And we spent a lot of our time talking about school choice issues, and that was a lot of the work that she's done in her capacity on Moms for Liberty there in New Mexico. So maybe we can shift gears and talk a little about what you're up to with New Mexico Alive.
Thank you. I started New Mexico Alive because my introduction into politicking world was helping with the school board elections and seeing where we are as a state compared to other states. We are the worst. And to me, that's very sad. But at the same time, George, I love our state. It is made of wonderful people, and my husband and I couldn't have done anything as well as we did here with our business. It's because of the state and the people that are in it. So I wanted to create New Mexico Alive because the sole purpose was to shout out the successes of our state, but also focus on the issues. And so that's what I did, and it was very successful. Many conservative people loved it because it brought all people together, no matter where you were on the political line. And so then I started that, and then I ran for the state Republican chair seat and didn't win that, came in second, but I still had a burning heart to do more with our state. And so I continued with New Mexico Alive and joined Viante, our C3 and C4 together. And now we have a coalition, which is the largest coalition, right of center, New Mexico has ever had. We've got Western Justice, we've got Heritage Action looking at us, and also Turning Point Action. We had our first event April 13th, and we had a wide array of speakers there, and many people attended. What we're wanting to do is move the dial to the right over the next 2 election cycles. We got a 4-year, a 7-year plan, and wanting to have success with that.
That sounds like a smart move. What I wanted to ask you, and some of this may be specific to New Mexico, but if you were to give advice to activists all across the country, because our audience is drawn from all 50 states, what advice would you give them on how to build? Because I don't think you can just kind of start on Labor Day before an election and really hope to change things radically. It's going to take a longer term plan. And it sounds like you have that. You mentioned this plan. So what advice would you give to activists who are saying, I'm wondering if my state can be saved, and people look at California and think that it's a lost cause? And I don't actually even believe California's a lost cause. But the reality is it's not headed in the right direction right now. So if you were to can kind of chart out its trajectory, that trajectory without change is kind of like a plane that's aimed towards flying into the peak of a mountain, which is not going to end well for anybody. But that doesn't mean you can't change that.
Right.
And obviously New Mexico is not California, but it's been traditionally, more of a blue state. So I guess my question is, what advice would you give, and how can people organize themselves? Because that's the beauty of a democratic republic. If you don't like how things are going, we actually, in theory, have the power to change them over time.
Yes.
And because of the ballot box, we don't actually have to, our founders actually had to fight a revolution.
Yes.
And you hear people talk about things like a civil war and all that stuff. And I think to myself, how about we just focus on changing things with the ballot box and changing hearts and minds and building this culture of freedom and opportunity? And that's what you're doing. So I want to ask for your advice.
Well, it's a great question, and I'm really excited to answer it because now is the time for people to get involved. We're kind of on an off cycle election year. Yes, it's a third tier, but it's grassroots, it's school board, it's city council, those kinds of things, which are just as important because it affects us probably the most. But now is the time. And what we found is that many of our voters, our conservative voters, are disengaged. We have little less than 300,000 low propensity voters here in New Mexico. Half of them haven't voted in the last 4 years, and the other half haven't voted in the last 10 years. But their behavior on the internet and different things show that they are a conservative voter. So we need to locate them and engage them within the community and playing offense. So many times, especially in the Conservative Party, seems as though we play defense. We've got to play offense, George. We've got to understand that it's an election month, not an election day. We need to get people registered to vote. We have to help them understand the issues and train people on different on how to be a volunteer and get campaign managers trained. There's an art to running a campaign. Any campaign can be won if you manage it correctly and you have good messaging and you know how to reach the voters and know which issues they really care about. There's a lot that can be done. But as I said, the low propensity voters are the most important that can change an election.
Makes a lot of sense because with you don't have to change their minds. You just have to change their activity rate.
Right.
And it sounds like they already agree with you. They just don't seem to be that engaged on election day or election month.
That's right.
And I was going to ask you, one of the things we've noticed that as we stretch from election day, even just 10 years ago to now kind of election month, we used to always have absentee ballots for folks but you had to request it in it yourself and then you would cast it. So it was a limited, it wasn't most of the electorate, for example, was participating. It was a small slice of it. But now we're to the point where it's really election month or election 45 days and things like that. How do we get people to feel like my vote matters and I'll show up and vote? Because I'm thinking maybe that's why they don't show up, is they think it won't matter. And you also see Republicans or conservatives saying, I'm not going to vote early because my vote won't count. And that's actually kind of, I think, a very dangerous approach because on election day, all kinds of things could happen. You could get a flat tire.
Yes.
You could, you could be in a little fender bender or something like that on the way to the poll. They've done studies on this, and people who fully intend to vote on election day often can't for a variety of reasons. Maybe they're sick. Maybe something happens at work that blows their day up.
Sure.
So it seems to me that we are foolish to I agree that it'd be better if we just had one election day. But as long as we don't, we really can't hamstring ourselves and make it so that a third of our voters won't be able to vote for a variety of reasons, but the other side gets to vote for a month.
Right. Right. What you said earlier, the phrase, my vote won't count, really hurt us this last election cycle in New Mexico. Several people didn't think their vote counted, and so they refused to vote. To me, that's something that is a mistake because
it's self-fulfilling.
It's self-fulfilling.
Every vote that's not cast doesn't get counted.
Yes. But as I said earlier, we need to know the rules, the election rules. In California, I believe in Orange County, they learned how to do ballot harvesting because that was what the left was doing. And so they learned how to do it and they changed the seats. So here in New Mexico, we actually, New Mexico Alive, we have a group that we're working with that is going to help us with the voter integrity so that we can learn and know how to get those absentee ballots and get them turned in. To me, it's a plan and you have to efficiently follow through with that plan. But as I said earlier, offense, doing that ballot harvesting like they are doing, we have to play the same rules. We have to be competitive, we have to be on offense, George.
It's a very good point. One of the things I learned in high school playing basketball was you had to play the game the way the refs were calling it. And some refs didn't call it right. They'd let people, for example, camp out in the key for more than 3 seconds, whereas the rule requires that the defense has to be moving in and out of the key constantly. The offense. And
Yes.
on some level, I learned to play the game the way it was being called, because
Yes.
if you don't learn that, you end up often losing games that you should have won, but you were just too dumb to figure out what's going on. And I feel like we've been in that phase as a party for a while now. We
Yes.
have to get over that. We have to play the game that's called. And then if we don't like the rules, once we have enough power, we can change the rules back to a system that's more likely to have voter integrity. And, every vote gets counted, but only once, and every vote has to be legitimate. That's fine. We can change that. We don't have to, but in the meantime, we better play the game that's being called, or we're going to lose and it's going to get worse.
I
I don't know
love
if you agree or
That's
not.
awesome. I love you saying that, because that's exactly what we need to do in New Mexico, is get new people into office that can change those rules. But until then, as you said, we got to play what the refs are telling us.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, yeah, I know you're the chair of the Viante Foundation. Are there any other things are they just working with these other groups and their things, or do they have any separate mission efforts, or if you will, callings?
So I'm glad you brought that up, because the gentleman who started Viante is owner of the largest plumbing company in the state, Dale Armstrong, and he really feels as though a lot of influence can be happen through our businesses. And so he really wants to help the employees of large businesses teach their employees, now this is the legislation that will help us have more business, or this is the legislation that will help your families. Almost playing the game the unions are, communicating to our employees what will help make our state more profitable and help us progress.
Interesting. I think that's a very good point, because an example would be, sometimes people think that something like a right to work law, which basically, or also employment at will law, somehow hurts employees, because right to work means that you don't have to belong to a union, but you can if you choose to.
Right.
But you can't be denied employment because you'd rather not be in the union.
Sure.
And then the kind of employment at will doctrine is that you can be fired from your position. And people say, oh, that's not good for you. And I'm like, well, actually it is, because if an employer believes that if they hire you, they're stuck with you for 100 years, they're less likely to hire you.
Exactly.
But if they realize that if after 6 months it's not working out, they can let you go, that's actually a good thing, because it means they're more willing to hire. And I had that situation as a youngster. I went to a construction site and told the guy there that I would work for free for 1 week to see if I was doing a good job. And he said, well, I'm not going to hire you for free, but I'll hire you for a week and we'll talk about it at the end of the week. And the point is, he was willing to hire me because he realized that if it doesn't work out, I'm not really out anything.
Right.
And so I had my first opportunity, and I was able to save money for my first car, save money to go to college. I was able to save money to actually support myself on a 2-year endeavor that I had kind of between high school and college. The bottom line is, kind of a service endeavor type thing. And so it changed my life. And I also learned a skill and so forth. But that was because he didn't have to take the risk that if I hire this guy and then it doesn't work out, that I'll go to court and spend time in court wasting my time and money and so forth. So I think part of about creating a society is where we have lots of opportunity.
Yes.
Because if we have opportunity, we can make our own future. I was just a 15-year-old kid, and it really was a good thing for me.
Right.
And the guy took a chance, but it was because he didn't feel like it was a big chance, and he needed to feel like it would be a low risk proposition, and so he gave me an opportunity. And I think that's how we want things to work out. And so on some level, it's interesting to hear a businessman who's been successful in building this, who understands these principles, suggesting, let's create an opportunity society. Let's create an opportunity society where you can be disadvantaged, you can be, whatever it is that you think is your disadvantage. If you apply yourself, we're going to create a society in which there's opportunity available to you.
Yes.
And I think that's really important. And I laud you for that, and I laud him for that. You guys are, it seems to me like you're just doing a lot of good stuff with a lot of different organizations. So I wanted to ask if you could tell our viewers and listeners how they can follow the work that you're doing, the various means, websites, social media, whatever it is.
Sure.
That I think they would like to know.
Sure. They can go to my website, nmalive.org. There you will find our different activities and what our mission is and what we're trying to do. Viante.com is also available. And then the coalition is under roadmaptoprosperity.com. And those are, you can find exactly what we did and their speakers we had. We had so many great speakers. It was something New Mexico hasn't seen in a very, very long time. But on New Mexico Alive, you can sign up and help us out. My New Mexico listeners, I'd love for you to come and be with us. I know I've got some dedicated people already, but it's going to take an army to move the needle. And I need as many hardworking hands as I possibly can. I was speaking with someone the other day, and they said boots on the ground is what will make the change. And that's what I'm needing, George.
Makes sense. I think that's the way Democratic Republic is supposed to work. We get involved, we cast our vote, we work hard, and we preserve liberty and freedom for ourselves and for our posterity.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah Jane, for spending this time with us. This has been very interesting, and it's very hopeful because I don't know that most of our viewers and listeners would have thought that New Mexico could be a budding transformation. And it sounds like there's people working on that and working to make it happen. So that's very good news. Thank you for putting a smile on our faces.
Thank you. I appreciate it, George.
Very good. To our viewers and listeners, don't go away because the Conservative Commandos will be right back. We're going to take care of a little business, but we will see you on the flip side.